Shikues nderuar televizorin shqiptare të Amerikës, ju përshëndes tu në Rom. Unë pata mundësinë të takonja dhe një mikesh të popullit shqiptar, bashortën e Joseph DioGuardit, Shirley DioGuardi, e cila ka dhënë dhe vazhdon të japi një kontribut të madh për çështjen kombëtare shqiptare. Është dënuar në Ligën Qytetare Shqiptare Amerikane, por njëkohësisht zonja Shirley është dhe një njohëse e mirë e çështjes së Ballkanit dhe veçanërisht asaj në Maqedoni, Kosovë dhe në Malinezi. The question is very easy for you. Together we are now in Rome.
Gani, thank you very much for having me on your program. I've been involved in the Albanian American Civic League for 20 years, and it's a joint partnership. Obviously, he began as an Albanian, starting at a very early time, as you know, going to Belgrade, challenging Milosevic, working for the fall of communism in Albania, and then together, and I was very much a factor in working for the independence of Kosovo. But coming to the point of Rome that you raised, and we're here together now, and I'm very glad, by the way, you're here, because one of the things that's concerned me, and I think members of the Albanian American community have heard me say for years, is that there is not enough attention to the fact that after so much Slav-dominated or communist-dominated reality, the world does not know the truth about Albanian culture, about Albanian history, about what Albanians truly represent. And being in Rome reveals so much, because Italy saved Albanians at various points in history, but it was Skanderbeg. It was George Castriati in the 15th century that saved Italy. Saved Italy from the total incursion of the Ottoman Turks. And having done that, Italy embraced and saved all the Albanians fleeing after his death, and it's really sort of 20 years after that, when they take over Albanian lands. Italy accepted, first of all, Skanderbeg's own wife and son, and then the Albanians fleeing. Then we have the fall of communism. Everyone knows when those boats came out of, tourists, and at first were being rejected, the Italians rose up and said, no, you have to save Albanians. Okay, this is early 90s, right? And then with the Kosovo War. So there's this history. In addition, there's the 51 Albanian-speaking villages in Italy, and the Albanian American Civic League will be going to Greci this week, which is the only village that Skanderbeg actually set foot in, and the the Kingdom of Naples and King Alphonse gave all of Greci to Albanian troops. It represents something else of importance, and that is that Italy has no problem with Albanians speaking Albanian, having Albanian education, and also speaking Italian. It's the story of tolerance. And what does that relate back to? Who are Albanians? And the fact that, and that's why it's so important that we're here for the canonization of Mother Teresa, because Albanians are Roman Catholic, Orthodox Christian, Muslims, secular mainly, and Jews who've lived side by side in harmony for centuries. That's the true Albanian story that repeatedly has gotten buried again and again by the attempt to crush certain parts of Albanian lands and to keep it divided. So it's very important for the world to realize that the whole concept of Besa, whether people think that it is completely realized at all times, is the driving force. And it's also what caused Albanians to save all Jews during the Holocaust. So now we get to go to the Albanian land, and we get to continue. And I think it's very, very important, and it could not be more important than what's happening with all of simply spending time in whatever space, because what's happening elsewhere, what's coming in from major Western media that has been falsely influenced, it's to say, no, Albanians are somehow Muslims, somehow, terrorists, somehow fundamentalist, and nothing could be false, more false. And we saw that especially, I think, in recent months when everyone was fleeing Syria, and we know how many have died, thousands, and we know millions have been displaced. And it's very commonly said in our newspapers that are English language newspapers, not Albanian language newspapers, oh, Serbia is doing such a good job, except someone forgot that the Syrians are coming through the Preševa Valley, and the people that are helping are Albanian.
Unë kam një pyetje sepse juve jeni njohës e mirë e Ballkanit, veçanërisht për çështjen shqiptare.
I can't think of a more difficult time, and kind of don't know where to begin on this, except to say that tragically, we've had so much corruption in the political elite, with very little exception, so it does not reveal, to the West, and even, give hope to many Albanians about what really is expected, or what kind of inspiration is there, what kind of, work is being done. There's so much that actually is creative, but what can we say about the future? If you have Kosovo, for example, where people cannot leave, they can't go to the West, they're not part of Schengen, but it's easy to get on a plane to go to Turkey, and we know what the environment is like. When we have a whole generation of educated people who really want to have make an important contribution to the world, unable to work. When we have an unemployment rate of 40% adults and up to 60% of youth in Kosovo, where is this going? And my belief, I believe strongly, I did a piece in December of 2014 called Confronting the Roots of Kosovo's Downward Spiral. I feel strongly that the political elite has been very irresponsible. I know there's some good people within it, but the West also has been willing to look the other way as long as there's no, there are no real problems, that there's, it's a false stability. There isn't a real concern for, as I said, what's going to happen to an entire generation, and I wonder how long this is going to last in its current position. The situation, I can't. And the same thing is true in Macedonia to a great extent. And there you have part of the political elite absolutely, on the Albanian side I should say, linked with political elite who are ethnic Macedonian Slavs, working together, lining their own pockets, perpetuating their own families and their own operations. What else can I say? We're talking about a small part of the population losing the path, and the path should always be, if you're part of a government, to really do the work of a municipal servant, to really care about your people as a whole, to really, frankly, you should be proud of the people as a whole and decide how you're going to advance in the world instead of taking an individualistic perspective for self-perpetuation and personal wealth. I'm sorry to have to say all of this. It's very tragic after the war, especially. We're only, how many years we're out now? 17 years. And there's so much that could have been done. I also feel strongly that Albanians, both at the intellectual level, cultural level, and political level, should be exchanging ideas all throughout all Albanian lands. For example, why don't we have an advanced Albanian curricula for every single level of education? It would be so easy to do. It wouldn't violate any laws. It would certainly inspire people, and it would be extremely productive. It would not only educate a new generation, but then if there was that kind of really collaborative work, then the West could be educated about an entire history they know nothing about. Again, we've only been out of the fall of communism in 1989, when for the first time the West started learning what was Eastern Europe really about, what was the former East Bloc about. It hasn't been that long. Most Americans, which is what I can speak for as an American, know very little And that has to change. And it could be done with some creative work, saying it's not about whether we're going to merge all Albanians. They're already there side by side. So the time has come to take creative steps. The same could be done with economic development. It could be done across Albanian lands.
Faleminderit zonja Shirley për informacionin që sollët. Unë tani kam një pyetje të fundit për programin e ligës për këtë vit.
One of the first things I'm going to be looking at, actually, and I think most of the Albanian American Civic League board is very interested in knowing, has the world finally learned that Mother Teresa is Albanian? How many times do we hear, I come from New York? Oh, but she's from Macedonia. Oh, but she's Indian. I know it's hard for Albanians to believe this is still the case, but it is. And we found it, that we discovered this during our trip here, and we were in a very special place at the canonization ceremony, and we still encounter this. And people are astonished and pleased to learn the truth. Why do I raise this? I want to see how does the press cover this important event in human history. Mother Teresa represents not just the Albanian world. She's of strong international importance. And it relates to, again, my ongoing concern that we must do something about two things. One is media. One is the public understanding at an international level of what Albanian history is about and who Albanians really are, and it has to be defined from an Albanian perspective. It can't be defined by oppressors anymore. That means Albanians have to step into the picture and develop it. So public relations is a very strong focus of the Civic League, and the other component is public policy, the U.S. government. A lot of governments in Europe think that if they're dealing with our embassies, that they're dealing with our government, but they're only dealing with part of our government. They're dealing with our State Department, which is part of the administration, no matter who is president and in power. And we still have a policy that is realpolitik, as long as there is no conflict, will kind of keep things the way they are. It's kind of, it ends up, unfortunately, being a kind of complicity in not making change. But our government in the United States has 3 points of power. And one is the point that we call the Congress, the U.S. Congress, House and Senate. That's where it's we, the people. How did we get Kosovo's independence recognized by the United States? We did it not through the State Department that initially rejected it for many, many years. First when Joe began the whole process, and then when I came later. But it's the U.S. Congress, whether it was Congressman Lantos or Congressman Gilman, or then by Senator Joe Biden, or Dana Rohrabacher, or today Ed Royce. The story goes on. It was always members of Congress, it was always we the people, our advocacy work with the House and Senate, fighting for change. And I should point out, since we're here, the most important hearing ever was 2005, and it was Congressman Henry Hyde's idea. He was chair, and he came to me and he said, you have a Catholic bishop. And that was Mark Sopi at the time, Bishop Mark Sopi. You have Domnus Georgi. He was the authorized biographer of Mother Teresa. You need to bring them to our International Relations Committee to speak. And they did come, and I also was a witness at this hearing. And there was a very important moment when Dana Rohrabacher turned to Henry Hyde and said, after talking to Mark Sopi, Bishop Sopi, do you have a problem with being a Catholic in Kosovo? Is there any danger? Oh, of course not. And he then turned, Mr. Chairman, if the Bishop of Kosovo does not have a problem, even though there's a Muslim, majority, why do we have a problem? It was that hearing that would lead President Bush to turn around and recognize the independence of Kosovo. That was a very, very important moment. So we are going to continue the work that has been done at the congressional level for 25 years And this time in the next period, we're going to have more focus actually on Macedonia because the situation there is extremely, I think, perilous, frankly. I think people are not understanding the conflict. And you've probably seen, I know, given the fact that you're Albanian TV of the USA, you're following this closely in ways that most Americans are not. But there's a breakdown inside the government. The European Union has tried to move in. The U.S. government has tried to move in. Fortunately, they've delayed new elections because they know they won't be free and fair. Our Civic League had a lot to do with that delay, and we're going to continue that work because we don't want to see an unfair procedure that then denies rights to all Macedonians. And I think that most important, we have to say to the EU and to our State Department, our government, you can't just proceed with the political elite. You can't just do this anymore. You must bring in, you have a huge civil society. So in Macedonia, Kosovo, we'll be working strongly with getting civil society input into the government. Another thing that we're doing is really more serious work, which I've done for many years, on the Preševa Valley, on Preševa, Medveđa, and Bujanos, because if there isn't kind of an action on the behalf of Albanians there, we're not going to have an Albanian world there in just 10 years from now.
Thank you very much. Faleminderit shumë zonja Shirley, ju falenderojmë për informacionin që dhatë dhe me shpresë se do të shikojmë përsëri. Thank you very much, Ms. Shirley. See you again in another state.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Faleminderit.
Thank you.